Um, Hello, Frederic.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm
Okay.
excited to talk to you and
Uh,
hear what's going on in Poland.
right. Yeah, I'm really delighted, and I'd like to thank you that you agreed to have a short chat with me about how things are with reinventing organizations in general. And I
Mhm.
think all the more so because since the book was out not so long ago, many things have been happening in Poland. So I think that giving a chance for some readers, some people who kept asking about the book and about the things, I think that would be some kind of a treat for them if we could just make that. So just to recap a short story of the book in Poland, which is just today realized that eventually it's not such a long time ago when your book was out, which is like February 2014. Is that
Mhm.
right? Yes. So at the end of that month, I read the book. Then next month, I wrote to you, fascinated about the whole thing. You replied, and then some months passed. I, eventually found somebody who knew somebody, and on the
Mhm.
9th of December, I found the date. You just signed or were notified that there was a publisher ready to publish the book. And lo and behold, on the 22nd of October, the book
Mhm.
is out on the Polish market.
Mhm.
But it's like a relatively short time, a bit, a year and then a few months. But I realize it's only been a small part in Poland, and I think I would like to ask you what has happened since that the book you published the book in general. I mean, how many other translations occurred at this period of time, and what else has unfolded? If you could just shortly tell us, I think we would love to hear that.
Um, it's really been quite extraordinary, beyond anything I expected. I think you know that I self-published the book,
Mm.
meaning that there was no marketing, there was no PR, there was no press article in any newspaper.
Wow.
It really just came out, and then people told other people, and it's
Right.
become really sort of a little phenomenon through word of mouth. And then on top of that, all sorts of things happened, like you wanting to translate it to Polish,
Mm.
and I think by now we must be at 16 or 17 translations. 4 or 5 have come out, and the others are getting ready. And in some cases, for the Russian translation, it was a person in Ukraine who just decided to pay the money to a translator
Okay.
for the
Wow.
book to come out. And the same happened in Chile, where somebody said, I just paid the money for the translation.
Okay.
And in Italy, a number of people got together to translate it. And so,
Okay.
really quite extraordinary. And there's all sorts of other projects that are happening around the book.
Mhm.
Um, there is a wiki that you might be aware of,
Right.
where we're trying to sort of open source the content of the book
Okay.
and put it on a wiki that everybody can enrich. So as soon as we find out about a new company that has a new
Mm.
practice,
Right.
we can enrich it. And a few hundred readers
Mm.
are working together on this
Right.
wiki. And 2 readers said, "Hey, we want to create a newsletter for
Mhm.
everything that happens around these new types of organizations." And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And they're now a team of, I think, more than 20 people
Right.
that are doing this. So all sorts of things like this that are happening. And the most interesting and I think rewarding for me has been to read about so many companies that have been inspired by this to actually really transition and
Mm.
make profound changes in the way they
Right.
operate.
Mhm.
And there are really all sorts of companies. I mean, there's some Silicon Valley companies. There's
Mm.
some non-profits. There's some think tanks. There's some industrial companies.
Are there
There's
any?
some very big ones. There's a global retailer that's 60,000 people
All right.
that is getting very serious about this. I
Mhm.
I met the CEO of a 150,000 people industrial firm who's very
All right.
serious about this.
Okay.
So I mean, there's not 100 of these very large firms, but there's a few
Mhm.
really large firms that are very serious about this. And I'm really curious what it will be in 2 years or 5 years. That maybe we will have a few sort of shining examples of these large firms that are changing.
And how are they going about this? I mean, those companies at the moment, are they approaching you and asking you for some help with counseling, or they thinking of doing them themselves? What's the pattern of that?
Yeah, some of these organizations ask me to help them, but I mostly disappoint them because I feel that I'm meant to live a very simple life, and I don't want to travel. And so I work with a few of the CEOs of these big companies over Skype, and we spend an hour every month just exchanging ideas. But if they want sort of more hands-on, people that spend time on the ground, then I suggest that they find someone else to do that. But what is interesting for me is to realize that these companies tend not to use big consulting firms to do this. There seems to be a sort of trust that we will figure it out on our own, and maybe we'll have a facilitator here or there for a meeting, but not the more standard approach of having a whole army of consultants, that go down on the company to transform it for them.
Yes. That seems to me to be very natural, actually. Actually, I thought about it as well, and I think that actually this sort of change, if it is going to happen in a company, that means that people who are going to go into that, I think they must be at the level that when they realize that it's not implementing a new structure or a new technique or whatever. You have to feel that. You have to be at a certain level of thinking, this teal thinking, to venture it. And then, as you said, I think then you realize that it's not a matter of big counseling company coming over and helping you. However, maybe at some point it's a kind of valid approach as well. But the more you trust that somehow altogether you just work it out, the more chances there are that it'll succeed. Would you agree?
Yeah, because really it comes from the inside, from where the energy is at in the organization, rather than something that's sort of forced from the outside.
That's right. So actually, that's another question I had in mind asking you. So how do you think? What's the pace of those changes? Like, let's say in 2030, do you think that this kind of that this paradigm of thinking of management would be kind of a significant would start playing a significant role in the world's economy or organization world?
I mean, the good thing is that I have my crystal ball here next to me. I can take it out, and then I can. So to be honest, I really have no clue. I live in a sort of bubble for the moment because all the messages I receive are from people who understand this, get this, and say, "Oh yes, we're doing this with our organization." So my feeling is the whole world is doing this. But then, of course, when I leave my bubble, I realize that it's still quite small, and I think it's pretty unpredictable. Maybe there will be a few big success stories that will have other people talking about it. And maybe there will be a big failure, and it will set back the whole thing because everyone will have said, "Look at this company; they tried it, it didn't work." So I really don't know, but I am surprised to see the extent to which this book is receiving, is resonating with people, and to the extent to which I see a lot of people who just dare to go for it. They, when they understand it and it clicks in their mind, they just say, "Okay, this is just the obvious thing to do." And we don't know exactly how it will work, and we'll make mistakes on the way, but that's what we will do. And that I think is very encouraging. So I don't know where we'll be in 2030, but what I'm pretty sure is that there will be a big ecosystem of organizations that function that way, and that it will be very clear that it's not experimental anymore.
Yes. Yeah, I think that when I keep thinking about why the book that you wrote uh, has been resonating so much, as you said, I think
Yeah.
the difference is I remember when I read Jim Collins or Gary Hamel books about pretty much the same thing, trying to describe different organizations or companies trying to be more innovative in a really different way from standard companies. But I think for the first time, sort of you showed from the teal level, uh, uh, you managed to discover companies that are run by teal managers, and that this is something which is not like an invention of a, I don't know, of a wheel, whatever. It's more like a, again, consciousness level, which
Yeah.
springs out and gives all these effects.
Yes.
So not taken away from what you've done, but I think that you've discovered something which has been going on and and carries on moving forward. But with
Yeah.
that, I have a question also about the way you wrote the book, because how did you, Frederic? How did you find all those companies? Because I think that putting an ad on the web or on television wouldn't work. I sort of that it also intrigues me, and I keep asking myself a question: if I applied a method that you applied in Poland, maybe I would find one or two companies like that. I mean, could you
Yes.
share with us, the
Yeah, I mean, there really wasn't a method. The day I decided that I wanted to understand and investigate this,
mm-hmm.
I just let everyone know, sort of around me, that I knew that I was looking for this. I just told everyone, if you know of, an amazing, strange,
Okay.
company, please let me know. And so
Okay.
a few of the companies came in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, Buurtzorg, the Dutch nursing organization, somebody pointed it to me like this, or
Okay.
RHD in Philadelphia, somebody said, "Hey, you should look up this company." So a few came in this way. Sometimes one or two people had written about. So Morningstar, Gary Hamel had written an HBR article, and that was also a friend who said, "Hey, you should read this HBR article," and I hadn't heard about it. There were two companies I found in a book called Freedom Inc. And so that was Favi and Sun Hydraulics. And so that book has many sort of more green organizations, and then these two. So really it was, and then I stumbled upon an article or a blog post on the internet. I tried to read as much as I could.
Okay.
So it was mostly just my network pointing me
Mm-hmm.
to things, and then stuff I read
Okay.
on the internet. And so, yes, I think you might be now in a position to ask that question in Poland
Okay.
and say, "Hey, what do you know?
Okay.
Who are the innovative companies out there?" And there might be companies beyond the radar screen
Okay.
that you might stumble upon.
Right. So that's a kind of like the saying that the universe conspired to help you once you started investigating and putting all the energy.
I like to think it is that way.
uh, okay. And what was the most challenging in the whole process? Because once you found them, okay, but which part? I mean, 3 years you spent, yes, on that project. So
For me, the most challenging was actually to have these companies agree to spend time with me in interviews
mm-hmm.
and be visited, because I had decided that I wanted to do it in absolute freedom. So I didn't want to do it
Mm-hmm.
with a big university.
Okay.
That would be a big name. And so I approached these companies saying, "Hey, this is Frederic Laloux from Brussels." And, I could have been a madman or a cuckoo.
Right.
They had no way of knowing.
Yes.
Um,
Joe Doe, yes.
and so I took, in some of the cases, these are all busy companies, and, it took quite a few attempts sometimes
Okay.
to get them to volunteer to spend time with me.
But are you in touch with some of them now? I mean,
Yeah, with several of them I keep in touch.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And like I mentioned, Jim Collins, who just wrote like the Built to Last, and then he came up with two more books or some more books on the same topic.
Yeah.
Do you have some thinking about, or do you think of maybe carrying on some research or doing some more written work or books? Or
for the moment, I'm busy with an illustrated light version of the same book. So not something new, but I heard from quite a few people that, so many people are interested by this topic because so many people feel pain in their work today, but not everybody reads a big 400-page book around it, right? And especially in areas that touch me, like hospitals and schools, people are not used to reading management books, right? And good for them. And so what I'm working on now is sort of instead of 400 pages, 150 pages, a lot of white space, a lot of drawings, to make it sort of easily accessible. And beyond that, I don't know, we will see. I mean, sometimes I have this thought in my mind that I just love to understand what the same, for instance, would mean for politics. We know that our political systems are broken, or not broken, but that we have outgrown them. That there must be something beyond democracy in the way we practice it today. And it would just be fascinating to see, are there already promising enough experiments out there for us to conceptualize what the next level might be? I think we're probably not as advanced. Like I won't find 12 countries that are already operating in a new way, so it might be a little bit more speculative.
Yes.
But personally, I would find it fascinating, and so maybe that will be enough of a drive to go through the somewhat long and painful process of actually then having to write the book.
Okay. If you were to recommend some to Polish organizations or leaders, some, I don't know, books, sites. I mean, putting aside the fact that yes, indeed, this is this self-growing process is very personal and things like that. But still, if you were to offer some kind of advice, what would that be? I mean, except for reading, of course, Reinventing Organizations.
The honest truth is of course that only they know, and something I would invite them to listen to is what might be the little voice they hear that makes them so interested and nervous that they maybe don't want to listen to it. Often we sense that there's something that wants to be different, that wants to do things differently. But we get a bit nervous because we're like, whoa, if I really listen to that, where will that take me, right? And that would be the voice I would invite them to listen to, and to just be courageous and experimental, and like a child, just go with it and see where it brings you. And it might be in the area of wholeness, of daring to be different with people in their organization and see where that leads. It might be in the place of self-management, that you try to trust people. Maybe there's a book that I read. If they read English, there's a book I found quite fascinating from the General McChrystal. It's called Teams of Teams. And General McChrystal was the person that during the Iraq War and was in charge of all the special operation units. So the really the SEALs that you drop to kill bin Laden and these kind of things. So very, very dangerous things. And he writes how hierarchy totally breaks down at that level. And only self-management can work. When things become so complex, and it's the best book I've seen that explains that when things become incredibly complex, hierarchy just breaks down. You have to operate with self-management. And I thought that was a fascinating read. I think if you read that book, you can no longer believe in hierarchy in complex times. It's really that well structured and written and great storytelling. So, if you're afraid of what self-management means, this book might give you courage. And another question, of course, an obvious one is this question of meaning. And as leaders of organizations, that's often a question we put a lid on, right? Because it is a scary question. But if we ask ourselves the question of what is really the purpose I'm serving beyond having the organization survive and beyond making money, if my children ask me, hey dad or hey mom, beyond making money, what was your life good for?
Yes.
You know, it's a scary question, but it's such a powerful question.
That's right.
Right? And often we really ask ourselves the question only when life deals us a real blow.
Right.
You know, when one of our children really falls sick, or
Yeah.
you know, when we're confronted with our own mortality, and suddenly then we wonder about what is it that actually that's important in my life.
Yes.
And how about we dare to listen to that question and not put a lid on it, and really wonder. And it's a scary question, but it's also an incredibly beautiful and liberating question.
That's right.
So that might be another question I might invite,
Yes.
leaders to.
Yeah, that it is beautiful actually, because I think it's so not so much because what you're saying, it's just pointing to the fact that it's not so much the truth is not hidden so much in books and in intellectual things. They may trigger off some thinking, but it's more like asking very courageous questions and deep, authentic questions. Yeah, that's right. Yes. Mm. And so I understand then, because as I remember, you said that you try to live your normal, peaceful life, not getting carried over and go to many conferences and visits. But still, is this the way you try to deal with all this buzz around? How do you deal with that, tension from the outside world?
In my case, I just know, and I don't know where I know it from, but I just know deep inside that I'm not meant to spend my life in an airplane or in a hotel room. And I have an arrangement with my wife where I do 50% of the work. So I bring my kids to school, and I bring them to bed, and I go to the supermarket, and I do cooking, and so that naturally then reduces the time I have to do work a lot, and then I just try to listen to what is it that I feel is the thing I really need and want to do. And for the moment, that is writing an illustrated version of the book and doing some other things. And so that then helps me become quite clear to say, then I will not travel, I will not do talks and conferences. And in the beginning, it was difficult, but I think one of the big learnings for me in the last year has been to say no and not feel bad about it, and to feel that I can say no, and that I'm not rejecting people,
right,
but I'm just saying no, and I'm thanking them, and I'm honoring them. And for the moment, I receive, I don't know, three or four requests for talks a day, something like this. And I just say no to pretty much all of them, but I always thank them, and I always I now have one person, Johannes, who's helping me with some of the emails for the first time in my life, and that's helping too. I think I'm also sort of in the lucky position that the book is really sort of finding its own way without me now. It doesn't need me that much. In the beginning, I was thinking like, hey, I should accept every blogger that wants to interview me or something because I have to help this book. But by now, I know it's doing its, it's on its own. It's become an adult,
Yes. Well, I must say that actually I completely agree with you, and this is my experience. Again, it's like to a lesser extent in my own personal life. The book appeared, accidentally, okay, in quotation marks, because I think that everything has some kind of purpose in materializing in your life. But to me, I feel the same. I know, for example, that so many things happen, like that this book will live its own life. Of course, I'm happy to write things, to talk about it. But yes, I think that, and from what you said, from watching all these sites that came up by themselves, people getting together, interested in that, talking about it. Frederic, thank you very much to have devoted so much time for our audience, for Poland. I'll be happy to put some subtitles and let people watch and listen to it. And who knows, maybe, I know, that maybe in a year's time, 2 years' time, maybe somehow you will be able to come over to Poland when you break the rule, or when you feel inside that that's the way you should travel with your whole family, not to get, apart from them. And maybe, we'll see you in person sometime. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.